Hey everyone, this is James from TDB bringing you another Inbetweenisode. Today I will actually be doing a drinking Inbetweenisode, but wanted to quickly introduce what I will be drinking. First, I'm going to be drinking the 502 and 504 versions of 7542 from 2005. So why this? Well, 2005 for one is a very interesting year. Of course I have access to these teas, so that's a big reason. But 2005, an interesting year. Just because it's not usually the year that people are going to cite as like being the super pivotal year for Puer, but if we look at that specific time period, it is a little unique. For instance, if you go from 2005 back 2 years to 2003, you'll notice the tea is quite a bit more expensive. Go forward 2 years to 2007, you'll notice that the price falls quite a bit from what it was in 2005. So it kind of just exists in this like very transitory time in Puer. Things like quantity were really getting ramped up. Those things I think have a very big impact on the price of these teas, specifically when it comes to factory Puer, and there is quite a lot of it being produced. And one thing you're going to note here is basically how much do these different batches matter. For instance, you're going to have 2005, the first batch is going to be 501, usually. Second batch will be 502, third batch 503, 504. I say usually because there's been a couple documented cases where it is supposedly out of order, and so something like the fourth batch is actually the first batch, it's just labeled weird. Anyways, as far as my knowledge goes, for this tea, the first batch is indeed the first batch. And so I think a tricky thing is, are you a drinker or are you a collector or are you kind of some combination of the two? For me at least, I firmly identify as a drinker as opposed to a collector. So I'm going to draw a comparison to like playing cards or trading cards or something. So if you have something like a first edition Pokemon card, that would be worth presumably more than like a third or fourth edition Pokemon card. Nevertheless, when it comes to playing, those cards will play exactly the same way. There's no practical reason if you are a player of the game to prefer a first edition versus a third or fourth, unless you are part of a collector, and in that case collector is a little different. So in this case you'll certainly see that dynamic when it comes to Puer and the different batches too. Usually the first one is highly sought after. Now the trick is the first batch actually better? And you'll find that it might depend a bit. I think there are some cases where people would definitely say, yeah, the first batch is significantly better than like the 10th batch or the 12th batch. Now, is it worth the price? And that's where kind of trying to figure out where that comes in. So I did a little bit of preliminary research on these teas because I will be comparing 502 and 504. I don't have the 501 access to that. Basically trying to figure out if this is more expensive for a good reason or a bad reason. In this case, the 502 is more expensive. It's over twice the price of the 504, so that's kind of interesting on its own. The 501, for reference, is about $660 a cake, 502 about $280 a cake, and 504 $119 a cake. So that's what I looked up at Donghe in August of 2024. So trying to figure out just which one I prefer. How much do batches actually matter? Of course, we can't answer that question with any definitiveness from just this comparison, but we can hope to kind of shed some light on these specific teas. Again, this is probably not going to be a perfect comparison because these don't necessarily have the same storage. I did get these from Teas We Like Tastings a couple of years back, so I don't know if these came from the same vendors or whatnot, but we'll be digging into it and we'll be seeing which one I prefer. Okay, let's get into the tasting. All right, so here we are. I have not done this comparison yet, and this is steep number one. So part of the reason I'm starting from the beginning too is I really want to get into kind of the storage as well. So I have 504 over here, 502. Not a perfect comparison. We're sharing the chai. It's also different, potentially different vendors. The 504, unfortunately, the stuff that I got here is a little more compressed than the stuff I got from the 502, which is a little bit looser. So I'm going to actually brew that a little bit longer, just a few extra seconds on the get-go. Just doing our best with kind of the hand that you're dealt, which, it's an imperfect comparison, but an imperfect is better than no comparison at all, I think, in this case. And I think it's a pretty good comparison overall, 504 versus 502. Interesting. Still developing that aroma there. I think woody, fairly aromatic too, in 502. And I could tell that 502 already coming apart there. .502 brews a little bit darker. Part of that could just be the fact that it's little less compressed, the bits that we're brewing here. Perfumey, woody. Go back to the 504. Interesting. Not totally different. Yeah, they both smell kind of like this mix of wood and fruit. Cheers. Woody, fruity, pretty fruity actually. I think still just opening up a little bit. Yeah, decent sweetness to it. And then let's dump this out and go to the 502. For me at least, these 7542s, it's not a regular drink for me. It's still, like the ones that I own are still a little on the young side of things. I think I own like a 2010, something like that. Around this age, I guess, is when I would potentially just get started drinking them. Also a little bit, I'm going to drink this and then I'm going to talk a little bit about just 7542, the tea, if you are not familiar. I suspect a lot of people are, so just going to quickly gloss over that. Done a number of episodes on them. If you search for 7542 on TDB, you'll probably get at least 10 episodes, I would guess, just because we've done so many different videos, and this is one of the most famous kind of pu'er tea recipes, if not the most famous. Cheers. So definitely on this initial steep, there's more flavor and things going on here. I'm kind of inclined to chalk that up more to the storage and the conditions of these specific teas, or maybe even the sample, just because it was one of the reasons I wanted to bring the first steep on, because I think that will potentially reveal a little bit more about kind of the condition it was in and what we're actually brewing than the tea quality itself. Yeah, definitely prefer the 502 on this initial one. Kind of sweeter, fruitier, woody, and definitely kind of presenting a little bit more like what we'd expect from kind of a 7542. And I think this is pretty drinkable, actually. Still got like kind of decent pour to it, but I think it's perfectly fine kind of as kind of more of a very burly factory style daily drinker. Okay, I'm going to reverse the order here. Start over at the 502 first and then go over to the 504. Yeah, I did try to break up the 504 a bit, but it's just, different cakes are in different conditions, so. Presumably, these are both Taiwanese stored just because it's from Teas We Like. I don't know that as a fact, but that's usually my default assumption with them. They don't tend to select for like super dry stored teas necessarily either, so they're not sourcing a lot of stuff from Kunming. So even if it's not Taiwan, it's probably, I don't know, Malaysia, something like that. Yeah, really developing kind of like these medicinal Chinese shop aroma to this, nice fruit, things like that. And let's go to the 504, and yeah, let's let that go for 10 seconds and see what we get. Okay. Don't want to overdo it either, so 502 distinctly brewing a darker color. I'm going to guess that these two probably had different storage. The 504 feels like it was stored a little bit drier. And it's not nearly as fruity smelling or as tasting as the 502 is so far. So I'd say the 502 is definitely more pleasurable to drink right now. Both have a nice perfumey essence coming from them as well. Cheers. Yeah, nice woody fruitiness. This reminds me a little bit of kind of the state that Sirius Formula was in when I had that a few years ago. It's very comfortable. In fact, it's not that brash at all for something like a 7542. So I think I'd be comfortable drinking it if this session is representative of it. Yeah, fruity. I'd say 60% fruity, 40% woody. Good sweetness, good body. Just pretty solid all around, I would say, about the 502. And we'll see how we like that 504 as we go back to it. This definitely still tastes like pure, so you still get some astringency and bitterness to it, for sure. But it's in a state where it's not bad. It's perfectly drinkable. Cheers. It's definitely thinner, this 504. Yeah, I mean, the comparison is quite strong, the difference between these two teas, and I'm doing my best to make sure it's not due to just the conditions of the cakes, but there's a lot less just going on in the 504. It's just a thinner profile overall. In fact, it's not really biting back that much. It just has a little bit of a greener profile too, so I would definitely say I prefer the storage condition of the 502. Yeah, I do think I'd probably like this a little bit more in a different context. It's not overly strong either. Okay, so far, definitely a strong preference to the 502. Enough that I would probably actually choose that tea to buy over the 504. Not that I want to spend $280 a cake on this. I think that's definitely a little steep for just a drinking price. But I would say I do prefer the 502 by a decent margin right now. I would say, actually, in the current state, that this is twice as enjoyable to drink. The 504 is not really just showing enough right now. And it doesn't necessarily have a lot of bite that would indicate future promise. Okay, now we are getting a little bit of a nicer color here to start with. So let's see how that's doing. Okay, so starting with the 504, we'll do 4 steeps here. Okay, aroma's starting to kind of merge a little bit together, so more fruit appearing there. So the color's closer together too, although I'd say 502 still a little darker. Just stronger aroma in general. It has that, I like the Chinese medicine shop aroma quite a bit too. It just smells very herbal, a little bit like ginseng, and I get a lot more of that in the 502. And I think this comparison at the bare minimum shows that the specific one you buy of a tea matters quite a bit, whether it's a different vendor, different storage, things like that. These on the surface are basically the same tea. 2005 Menghai Tea Factory, 7542. But I do think there's a pretty big difference in the experience. So if one had 502 as their only 7542 experience versus 504, you're potentially going to come away with pretty big takeaways, just because I think the differences, there are some pretty significant differences for these teas. So I think for people that are just starting out and don't have necessarily a lot of repetitions or a lot of different samples, I think that's an important kind of humbling lesson to note, is not to overjudge your own experiences necessarily. I wouldn't say even the 504 is a bad example of 7542. It's just different and not as good. Cheers. Big difference on the aroma. I'd say that might be the biggest difference between these teas. Cheers. Taste-wise, they are starting to converge a bit. It's not terribly different anymore. Let's see how they go on this horse steep as well. Definitely a little greener on that one. Okay, so we will start with the 504 over here. This is definitely a session where I'm going to get a little sweaty just because this is a lot of factory tea to be drinking. These factory tea comparisons, I don't do them for the enjoyment. I'll tell you that much. I prefer to have factory teas on its own just because it's a lot of caffeination, a lot of tea that I'm feeling. So I'm definitely getting sweaty. I wouldn't necessarily call that chachi or anything. It's just strong tea and a lot of caffeine. Okay, so that's the 504 in my cup right now, and we're making the 502 over here. So what will probably happen is I will most likely just continue to drink my favorite of these throughout the rest of the day rather than drinking them both. Most likely that's going to be the 502, but we'll see. 502 continues to have like a little bit nicer, darker color. So I would definitively say I prefer the storage and the condition of the 502 right now. Whether it's worth twice the price, I would like to get more data points on that before I definitively say that, just because, your mileage is gonna vary significantly. Like if it was a Kunming stored 502 and like a Kunming that I don't particularly enjoy versus like a Taiwanese or Malaysian stored 504, I might easily take the 504. But I would say from this specific data point, I am thinking that the 502 is at least a fair bit better in terms of material. Cheers. Yeah, it's just drying and it doesn't hold up well in comparison to the 502. It's just not that pleasant. The profile, even when it gets a little darker, is still just a little too astringent, still a little too drying. For me, at least, the 504 is not close to being drinkable. Maybe in 5 years, it could reach the same state as the 502. I mean, we're kind of just guessing at different numbers here. Yeah, I mean, it's okay. It's not bad. It does taste like factory brewer that's semi-aged, as does the 502, but the 502 is just clearly a much better storage and just much more of a drinkable condition. So going to the 502 here to hopefully just confirm these last impressions. Causing a little bit of mess. Whoops. Cheers. Yeah. 502 definitely my preference here, enough so that I would say, I would say this tea experience is twice as good as that one. Is it twice as good a material if they were held equal and they had the same storage? I want to say probably not, but that's what I'm operating here. But yes, I would probably pay twice as much for this tea at this current state. Which is not the answer I necessarily expected. In fact, if I were to guess, I would have leaned the other way. So that's interesting. Yeah, this 502 is nice. It's nice, it's drinkable, there's good sweetness, there's a good balance to it. It does taste firmly like factory pour, but it's not overly astringent or anything like that. And I think when you're comparing the two, the astringency really, really stands out for the 504 and the dryness and just kind of a less pleasant profile. I think if we compare this versus the 504 versus an even lesser 7542, like a 2012, it might stand out and might be quite good. But I think when we are comparing 2005s together, it doesn't taste very good. So yeah, thank you all for tuning in. Let me know if you found this interesting. Let me know if you have any specific experiences comparing batches and things like that. And I will see y'all next time. Peace.